Newsmax TV coverage of the 2016 New Hampshire primary rolls right along. Another live shot from Donald Trump headquarters in Manchester, New Hampshire, as we await the Republican victor to step to the podium and have a few words to say. With me here on the anchor desk, Dick Morris. J.D. Hayworth thanking you for making Newsmax TV your choice for New Hampshire coverage. Dick, a whole lot of things going on right now. A quick check of the numbers. Obviously, Trump is going to win. Kasich in second place, but now a battle for third. Ted Cruz leaping ahead of Jeb Bush. Very interesting to see this take place.
Well, we have to watch how this evolves. At the moment, they're each at 12, but Cruz, I think, rounds higher, although I'm not certain about that. But the real issue here is that Cruz is assured of being in the field because of Iowa. And if Kasich is in, and Bush is in, and Rubio's in, and Christie's in, that's far too crowded an establishment lane. The real question about Donald Trump is, can he win a two-way race? And a lot of people say he can't. They say he's got 34% of the vote here. Well, that means 66% are not voting for him, and that he's such a strong, polarizing personality. Now, I don't know if that's true, and we need to see if it's true. But to test it, you need a two-way race. And with this establishment lane so crowded, the odds are, frankly, that none of them pass the 20% threshold and get delegates in a state like Texas, and Cruz and Trump divide the whole thing.
Well, we will have to wait on Texas. In the here and now, we're still waiting to see who finishes second really through the rest of the ballots in the Republican primary, the rest of the field. And when you mention the word establishment, last week, the guy who appeared to emerge as the establishment candidate was Marco Rubio. He got the momentum. They called it Marco-mentum. Dick, it was interesting today to read some of the conservative blogs, some of the conservative news outlets on the internet. I believe it was Breitbart.com that characterized the Fox News coverage of Marco Rubio as being akin to a de facto leadership pact, that they had settled on Marco because of his embrace of amnesty, because of his telegenic nature. And right now, things are not looking so good for Marco. What does that say about Marco? What does it say about Fox?
Well, about Rubio, he's just had the most acid test you could have in that debate, and I don't think he lives that down, particularly not with attractive alternatives like Kasich and Bush, who might overshadow him in that lane. But I have to tell you, J.D., I am shocked at Fox News. You know, I used to hang around there a lot.
Yeah, I used to see you on there on occasion.
Yeah,
sure.
I've made 2,100 appearances on Fox News.
But who's counting?
And nobody ever told me what to say. Nobody ever told me who to slant for. At the end of the 2012 cycle, they were a little slanted to Romney because they wanted to clean Gingrich and Santorum out of the field, and Romney was the obvious nominee, and they wanted him to get the nomination to be competitive with Obama. And a lot of Republicans shared that view. But when you watch Fox News these days, every minute is about Rubio. The establishment candidate, the huge momentum, the unbelievable surge, and it's in subtle things. You'll see Rubio's picture. They'll do Trump and then Rubio and then everybody else later. They are flacking for him unbelievably. Now, behind the scenes, the rumor is, that Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, is for Rubio, but that Ailes, the director of Fox News, is for Trump. And that there's a dynamic going on between the two of them for control of the network's coverage. Now, that's not firsthand, it's second and third hand, and we don't know if it's true, but every time I watch Fox, I am appalled at the level of bias of that station in favor of Marco Rubio. And the harder sell it becomes, the more unusual it is that they're pushing it like that.
It is somewhat ironic that there is even a Rubio ad where voters are looking up and seeing him on television as if that is the thing. Well, we got to have this guy because he looks good on television. But the saying in politics is live by TV and perhaps metaphorically die by TV. Christie may not come out of this with any type of victory other than establishing again his bona fides as a prosecutor. One of the key exchanges from the ABC News New Hampshire debate last Saturday night.
I want the people at home to think about this. That's what Washington, D.C. does. The drive-by shot at the beginning with incorrect and incomplete information, and then the memorized 25-second speech that is exactly what his advisors gave him. See, Marco, the thing is this. When you're president of the United States, when you're a governor of a state, the memorized 30-second speech where you talk about how great America is at the end of it doesn't solve one problem for one person. They expect you to plow the snow. They expect you to get the schools open. And when the worst natural disaster in your state's history hits you, they expect you to rebuild their state, which is what I've done. None of that stuff happens on the floor of the United States Senate. It's a fine job. I'm glad you ran for it, but it does not prepare you for president of the United States.
Chris, your state got hit by a massive snowstorm 2 weeks ago. You didn't even want to go back. They had to shame you into going back. And then you stayed there for 36 hours, and then he left and came back to campaign. See, those are the facts. Here's the bottom line. This notion that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing is just not true.
There it is.
He knows exactly what he's doing.
The memorized 25-second speech.
Well, that's
and so now look, there is
Talk
message.
about walking into it. Oh my God.
Message discipline you need, but you don't need to go back and repeat it. But let us tell you what is coming tonight. And without fear of contradiction, at least in the debate format, we are waiting Bernie Sanders to step forward and claim his victory in the Democrat primary in New Hampshire. You see the scene right there as the young enthusiasts for Bernie Sanders are there. And of course, Bernie is the next door neighbor, being a senator from the state of Vermont. And as soon as Bernie comes out, we will go live to his speech. For now, Dick's got something he wants to add.
Next door neighbor is Hillary propaganda. It is true that Vermont is next to New Hampshire, but usually it's Massachusetts that dominates New Hampshire because they all watch TV that originates in Boston. So Romney won New Hampshire, and Tsongas won New Hampshire when he ran, was senator from Massachusetts. But Vermont and New Hampshire have nothing to do with each other. In fact, they're totally different states. Vermont is a rural state where people live after they've largely given up on cities, and New Hampshire is a bedroom suburb of Boston. So very different in their thinking. The key point about Sanders and Hillary is Sanders has a coherent message, 10-second message. The economy's rigged by campaign contributions from the top 10th of 1%, and it's creating income inequality. Hillary has no message. 1 minute she's the experienced candidate. The next minute she's the first woman. The next minute she's really anti-establishment. The next minute she's the one that can handle foreign policy. And then she says things that the average 2-year-old knows isn't so. That Bernie Sanders taking $1,500 that he donates to charity for a speech is the equivalent of her taking $21 million from the richest banks in the country and keeping it. I mean, she just has no understanding of how lying goes with the voters. And the dominant stat from these exit polls, for goodness sakes, 1/3 of the voters said honest and trustworthy is the #1 quality. That you always get. But 95% of those who said it are voting for Sanders? My God.
It sounds almost like, remember the numbers in the old Soviet Union when there would be an election, and 98% would be with the guys in power, and you wonder the other 2%, they were in Siberia voting in conditions there. But it is interesting to see this kind of change within the Democratic Party. And when you think about this, and this is not small potatoes, although those of us who for a time or two may have swung a partisan brickbat sit here and take a look at the Democrat Party and say, my goodness, are they really going to embrace capital S socialism in the person of Bernie Sanders? We talk about the Republican establishment, Dick Morris. I imagine there are a whole lot of Washington Democrats who are going to be putting Pepto-Bismol on their breakfast flakes tomorrow.
I recall so vividly that in 1980, when Ronald Reagan was running for president, people said, are they going to nominate another Barry Goldwater? Didn't they learn their lesson when they got clobbered in '64? And now you hear a lot of people saying, didn't they learn their lesson with McGovern in '72? Well, times change.
Yeah, a lot of things change, and you sure wouldn't run a 1964 campaign in 2016, nor a 1972 campaign, although it is instructive to go back and look at the ads. You saw right there, the live scene, we continue to wait for Bernie Sanders to come out on the Democrat side, and also on the Republican side for Donald Trump. As we went on the air tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, various media outlets were calling the race, and those numbers have held up. Where Sanders wins the Democrat primary, Donald Trump wins the Republican primary. The fight in the Republican Party is really for the positions 2 through 4,
right,
I guess is what we're looking at right now. And as we look at that, it looks like Kasich has settled in second, although it could be subject to change. But really the battle for third between Cruz and Bush.
And Rubio. Rubio just bounced up to 11. So you have Cruz statistically above Bush at 12, Bush at 12, and Rubio at 11. The order of finish of those three candidates matters a great deal.
Yeah, and when we take a look at this, I find it interesting that so many commentators were looking at New Hampshire, and granted, it is a very different state from Iowa, and yet the evangelical community in New Hampshire, as small as it might be, still, if it turns out en masse for Ted Cruz, that is not an inconsiderable vote total given the dynamics of this field.
And certainly is not inconsiderable in South Carolina, the next stop on the thruway.
Yeah, it'll be interesting looking ahead to South Carolina because we saw the early ads.
And by the way, significant in Nevada, too.
Yeah, and when we take a look at what is going to come next in South Carolina in 2 weeks' time, for purposes of full disclosure, a state where I once worked and voted, it is always interesting to take a look at the primary dynamics. We saw early in the campaign when Jeb Bush was trying to project himself as a national candidate that he used a national security speech from the Citadel. I think some of the footage continues to run. You've had, as was made mention earlier, George W. Bush appearing in an ad for his brother, the former president, on television now in South Carolina. But Dick, my question to you is not so much the evangelical establishment division or really the evangelical national security dichotomy, as much as it is border security. South Carolina, granted not a border state per se, but that remains a big concern in a state that has had a renaissance in manufacturing, bringing in companies like Michelin to Greenville and seeing the presence of other high-tech firms.
The establishment media here is so much in favor of immigration reform that it obscures the realities that are apparent when you look at the voters. The fact of the matter is this entire Republican primary is being waged over immigration amnesty. And that's what gave Trump his lead. It's what gave Cruz his victory in Iowa. It's what has knocked Rubio down. And ultimately, I believe Rubio and Kasich and Bush are all too liberal on that issue to be able to win this year.
And we have about a minute left. I'd be interested in your reaction. Again, in the Breitbart.com column this morning, accusing Fox of editorial bias toward Rubio, they made the point in the last Fox Business Network debate, there was really an effort to stay away from discussion of the immigration question, especially Rubio's sponsorship of the Gang of Eight bill. You believe that's going to be harmful to his political health in South Carolina? Got about 30 seconds.
Well, absolutely. I mean, he tried to fudge it with Cruz's record, which was really wrong. But the point is that he's clearly on record, not just on record for Gang of Eight, it's his singular achievement. When you ask, what did you do in the Senate? That's the key thing that he does. And Republicans are convinced that if you grant amnesty, you'll have another 13 million people coming into the United States to get their amnesty, and that it's a never-ending process. And it's hard to see the Rubio or Bush or Kasich being able to overcome that. On the other hand, Cruz has got to make it a big enough issue to overcome Trump's lead, because Trump got his baptism on that issue. That was his first issue, and it still is his best one.
I hear the traveling music. Tell you what, we are going to be back in just a couple of minutes. We continue to monitor the situation for Bernie Sanders, waiting for his speech, also from Donald Trump. You stay with us. There's more here on Newsmax TV.